and welcome to In Conclusion. This is your week in review. I'm Kejan Haynes. There was a lot to talk about this week, but we're going to focus on one thing in the first segment because it's something that keeps coming up in the media, and this is something that we definitely want your opinions on. So please tweet us at TV6TNT or Facebook us, CCN TV News, and whatever you do, make sure you use the hashtag In Conclusion. So there's no good way to start this segment without a warning, and this is going to disturb you. This is the picture of the front page of the TNT Mirror that came out on Wednesday. I figured I'd refrain from blowing it up on your screen for too long, so we're going to take it down now. But if you were walking down the street and saw this on a newsstand, that's exactly how you'd see it. There's no warning for that. But there were also a lot of people who saw this on social media, online, and that's where I saw it. And to be honest, at first I thought it was just a bad Photoshop. It wouldn't be the first time that someone's tried to Photoshop a fake front page image and then have it go viral. But when it happens, it's usually so outlandish that I have to ask, really? Do you think that we do something like that? But then something like this happens, and then you see why. But before we go further, let's just state for the record that we reached out to Irene Medina, the editor of The Mirror, to get her comment on this front page, and we also invited her on the show. She declined and said that if she's going to make a statement, she's going to do it within the pages of The Mirror. And that comes because it's interesting that in today's Express, that's Friday's Express, there's a story quoting Senate President Razia Ahmed saying that we print only sensational stories to sell papers. But, if the public continues to buy, keep in mind this issue of the Mirror flew off the stands, and that's why it's a paper and not the actual physical copy, because I couldn't get a copy of the papers. But if the public continues to buy, and Medina is now saying that she'll reply in the Mirror, you can see that that might just be their next best-selling issue. But the reaction to this was very strong, especially from members of the media. Judy Raymond, the former editor at the Trinidad Guardian and former vice president of MAT, wrote on Facebook that she was upset about the picture. And she went on to say that, she said, I'll quote some of it. She said, some people are using it to bad-talk the media as if any or all media houses had published it or would publish it. And later on, she says that the publishers should be named and shamed and not just have a blanket slur on all the media. And of course, we have a new media association, and this was their first real test. Everyone looked to them to see what they would say. So they issued a release as well, and if we're being honest, they skirted around the issue. And yes, they did call out the media houses, unfortunately not by name, who published photos of heads and bodies being poked in morgues and crash victims on TV and ministers' bodies, which, of course, we are all, including TV6, responsible for. And where you thought they would take a position, all they said was they stand in solidarity with its members, including those editors who, in a time-honored tradition of print journalism, decide to publish and be damned. The association takes a small step toward a common set of ethical guidelines that will assist practitioners. I mean, this was like a golden opportunity to come out and take a stand and maybe condemn the showing of these bodies all over the media. But where Matt fell short, Sheldon Yearwood of Win TV picked up the slack and went on to say what a lot of people hoped the Media Association had said.
There needs to be a code of conduct to guide, I'm using my words very wisely, to guide media practitioners, media houses. Because this runaway horse will be hard to tame. This kind of nonsense needs to stop. If we want people to respect the craft and respect the fraternity and, of course, respect journalists in this country.
Now, to be fair, the Media Association did also call for a new code of conduct, but so we'll talk about that a little later on. But Sheldon also made a very good point that we didn't air in this part of this interview, but that noting that there was no byline to the story. So maybe the journalist or journalists weren't too proud of what they wrote. Anyway, moving on. As journalists, we also always say that we do this for you, the public. So we went to find out, what they thought about the whole Mirror article.
Oh, that's well disgraceful.
No. Something wrong there. That's the front page of the Mirror, is it?
Yes.
So something is wrong.
Not nice. That's an indecent behavior, but I don't think it's right for them to publish it.
Do you think they should have published it?
Yeah, that the media, so I show everybody.
So you think you should have? You think they were okay for showing it then?
Yeah.
It's a bit inappropriate for a front page, especially because I'm in my top audience that under the age that shouldn't be seeing something like this.
And you think that the media should be showing pictures of bodies at all?
Not in full view like this.
Where is the vibes and putting it up? Just to say how to find him or something?
That's what you want to know.
I don't understand that should be published, man.
So the image doesn't really upset you, it doesn't seem like.
No, it wouldn't really upset you. It will upset you if you know your children have to see that papers, right? But other to that is like, wrong place at the wrong time for here, I guess.
If they're against Ian Allen for showing certain things, why them should show others, which is basically the same? It is unfair.
All right, thanks, man.
Yes, it don't make no sense at all, which is correct. Eh?
I appreciate that, thank you.
And that is the body we did find.
In Tobago.
All right, now,
Yeah.
that is really poor. It is not good for the society, to tell you the truth, eh?
So a lot of diametrically opposed views there, but most people seem to be against it. The other thing that we haven't seen right now yet is a response from the Coker family. Let's take a break. We'll have a response from the Media Association just after this. But first, this is your 8 o'clock news headline. Remember, it's just satire. Welcome back. As we were saying earlier, Matt's release on the Mirror article was met with mixed reactions by the media fraternity and the public as large, with many feeling that they should have taken a stronger stance. So we spoke to Matt Vice President Khalifa Klein to understand what went into the release. So Matt's response to the Mirror article was not necessarily well received. It was perceived as being a little vague and not taking a stance. So what was he thinking behind Matt's response to the Mirror's article?
Okay, firstly, I disagree that Matt did not take a stance or take a position with our release. What happened was, I feel people are very used to hearing Matt condemned or Matt supported. What we attempted to do was open the conversation as opposed to shutting it down with one statement that gives a position of condemning or supporting, which we didn't intend to do. The point of opening the conversation is so that we can get more views from the public, from journalists, from members about the ethical policies that need to drive the media. It's all part of what we've been discussing in terms of freedom of expression as well. In terms of our campaign, we're looking at reporters giving us their views on freedom of expression. It's something we've been doing. But we understand that freedom of expression has two sides. It's the freedom of expression, freedom of the press, but there's also a certain responsibility that goes with that. But in order to find or to get an actual policy, we need a conversation started.
So now is it that we're actually going to see Matt push for some sort of ethical guidelines or code of conduct, so to speak?
It is the plan. We meet as a general membership on May 23rd, and that's the proposal that we're bringing to our members. Now, while we are looking to go toward the direction of a code of ethics, we also need to remember that media houses, they all have their own editorial policies and ethical codes as well. So while Matt can come up with one for our members, everybody needs to realize that even the Mirror newspaper has a guiding policy, and that's what they follow.
Now, is that why, maybe another one of the reasons why Matt did not take such a strong position? Because it would be you as vice president, you can condemn an action, but then what happens if your newspaper does it? Can you come out and condemn your own bosses? So is that something that came into play when coming up with a statement?
Okay, Kejan, again, we did take a stance, and if you look at our release and the statement that we put on Facebook, you'll also notice that we did not share the post. We did not repost it, and the reason for that is because we did think it was insensitive, just like everybody else, we can tell, but we need to respect freedom of the press, and we need to understand that each media house, as I already said, has their own policy, and we respect that. But we also respect that the public can question this, and the public, family members, can go to that media house or can go to the TTPBA or the Media Complaints Council when that is fully functioning and make a complaint.
So has anyone actually, have you looked at some of the comments that came under that release on Facebook? What do you think about them? Because a lot of them weren't constructive. All it came about was condemning Matt for maybe not taking a stand. If you were looking for constructive criticism and you didn't get it.
That's the thing. The constructive criticism we received didn't necessarily come on Facebook, although some of it did. So on our Matt page, Rona Batiste, I believe she's the wife of OMC, she actually sent a statement to us letting us know that she really appreciated the release, that she thought it was constructive and forward thinking. And that's what we want to do. We want to move forward. We don't want to sit and have this conversation where something bad has been done and we say, okay, we've condemned it and that's it. No, we want to have a conversation moving forward. And some of our members, they agreed that it was the right stance to take. Other members criticized it, and that's something we have to talk about moving forward. But it was a decision we decided to make.
Now, it all comes down to members of the public and how members of the public reacted to this photo. Is it now that we can firmly say that since the public didn't like this, freedom of the press can also mean not upsetting the public?
The public is going to be upset regardless. But why are we looking at this specific photo when the horse had bolted a long time ago?
That is true. It's not the first time, and every media house has come up with, and every time we go back to this same position.
We go back to the same position, but I feel that it's good that the public is having discussion and is telling media houses that this is unacceptable. It's up to the media houses now to learn from the response and to probably put something in their policies so that they don't offend the public or they are more sensitive to family members in the future.
Do you think Matt succumbed to public pressure by issuing this release? Because as you said, you don't want Matt to continuously come out and have to condemn things every time it comes out. Is Matt now going to start taking maybe some more time before coming out and making a statement, or are they not going to make statements every time somebody gets upset by everything that happens?
Kejan, we made the statement we felt we needed to make. It wasn't about public pressure. It was about seizing the opportunity to have a discussion on ethics in journalism. And we did that at the time we did it because that was the conversation everyone was happening. The public was demanding that journalists be more responsible, and we want journalists to have that discussion. We want the public to have that discussion. And so, to me, it wasn't that we buckled to pressure. In the future, if a statement is needed, we will issue a statement. In the future, if there is something that draws the attention of the members and the public, we'll have to deal with it once it falls under Matt's remit. We need to remember that Matt is not a regulatory body.
Right. And so, as Matt not being a regulatory body, has anybody contacted the association asking that it actually does, take this extra step to maybe become a regulatory body or something like that?
We haven't had that request yet, but we are open to any discussion with our members on May 23rd.
All right, thanks a lot, Khalifa. Khalifa Klein, the Vice President of Matt there. But you know what? All of this comes around the time that it's World Press Freedom Day. That is tomorrow, May 3rd, celebrated around the world. So here, Trinidad and Tobago, members of our media were asked to say what press freedom means to them. Here's a few of the video responses.
Journalists across the country are showing that they are not going to be trampled upon. They are not going to let government, opposition, anyone stand in the way, even the president, to stand in the way of them doing their job.
Without that press freedom, voice or tweet, I am sure suppression will reign supreme.
When women in the media are subjected to intimidation tactics and threats, while their male counterparts are treated to a higher level of respect, we know we haven't reached the level of press freedom to which we aspire.
To ensure that there's no political interference and no corporate interference as well. I think we shouldn't forget how tremendous corporate interference can be the pressure from advertisers and whether or not that stifles content and alters content.
There's also the freedom against persecution, victimization, and it gives me the freedom to go as far as I want to legally to get the story, to bring it to the public.
And even at times taking a risk by breaking the rules or going against the standard norm or practice of the media house you may be attached to in pursuit of honest and accurate reporting.
Social media has blurred the line between media provider and media consumer.
And because those lines are blurred, anyone with access to social media or technology, they need to realize that the responsibilities of press freedom also apply to them.
We must also understand the responsibility that comes with that freedom. And we cannot trample on the rights of others because we are members of the media.
And I'm going to add mine to the list. To me, press freedom is about having those difficult discussions that you know that society needs to have, even when you know it'll make people feel uncomfortable. To me, press freedom is about ensuring that nothing important gets swept under the rug. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. If you ask someone where they were on May 4th, 2014, they mightn't be able to tell you offhand. But if you ask them where they were when they found out that Dana Seetahal was killed, you bet they'll remember. It's a story that no one in the country has forgotten, and that's in a country with a 9-day memory. TV6 spent the week looking back at the day and talking to the family in the year that's passed, finding out what's going on with the investigation. I sat down with Mark Bassant and Jovan Ravello to talk about their stories. And TV6 has been doing a series of stories in the lead up to the anniversary of Dana Seetahal's death. Jovan and Mark, thanks for joining me. What was the reason for revisiting this case? Not that we've ever left it behind, but what was so significant about this week that we had these series of stories?
I think with the year anniversary approaching, it was important that we highlight the progress in the case. A lot of the family members have been clamoring for some kind of result, a lot of members of the public and members of the legal fraternity also. And given the nature of the murder itself, I think it was important that we bring it to light again. You know, this is something that happened in the country. It was an attack on one of the major systems in the country, and we should not forget it.
And I think you would have spoken to the family. You would have. What was the feeling that you got from them, other than obvious anger?
Sadness, and they're very unsettled because, you know, she was a big part of the family. I spoke to, behind the scenes, I spoke to other family members, and they said, you know, like Suzanne Francis would have said, it's a big hole in their lives. She was an integral part of the family, and she brought everyone together, and now she's just not there.
And I think moving on, just to not just the family, there's the police aspect, and Mark, you've been covering that, or uncovering that, as I should say, and you've been poking at some very important holes in the police investigation. And when you're looking at this now, are you, again, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, are you prejudicing the case, or are you damaging the case in any way when you do these things?
Well, I wouldn't say that, because nobody has actually been charged. You know, the matter is not before the court. So there's no way I could prejudice an investigation per se if nobody has been charged. And we know what the confines are when a matter is before the court. Having said that, I think there has been, as Jovan would have indicated, a considerable amount of interest with this case. I mean, if we look back 20 years ago to the assassination of former Attorney General at that time, Selwyn Richardson, there was speculation, of course, on June 20th, 1995, when he was shot dead outside his home, that the men that allegedly killed him were Jamaat members who were themselves executed a short while later. However, there was no concrete information or evidence to say, hey, these were actually his killers. There was speculation, and of course there were suspects. So that case ultimately remains open. Is it that we're going to be caught in that sentiment where family, 1 year later, the family is asking for answers? I mean, I spoke to at least 5 or 6 family members at length, some on camera, some off camera, and they would tell you that imagine on the crime scene, not a police officer came and spoke with any of them. It was by fortune that, that another officer who was passing, knew them, was able to get some information and then tell them what was happening. Because her brother initially told me that he got a call saying that she was in an accident and to come to the scene. So he got there.
And that call came from the police or just a call?
A call from someone. Okay. I don't think it was a police officer. And at that time, you know, information is still coming in. So, you know, maybe sometimes that's how they want to break the news to you of a loved one dying. And I mean, it's more acceptable. And I mean, at least somebody dying in an accident, you know, that's fate sometimes. But somebody getting murdered at the hands of cool-blooded assassins is another thing.
So what's the reaction been to your stories? Is the family now happy that you're raising this, or are they upset that they're once again in the limelight and maybe not necessarily for the best of reasons?
I think, like I said, because they're looking for closure, they're pleased that we kind of brought it back up to this scale. You know, a whole week of stories is something different from just one story a day. And they've said that, you know, they have some unanswered questions and they need them answered. So I think they've been very receptive of what we've been trying to do.
What's the police reaction been like to your stories? Because your stories paint the police in a very negative light.
Well, coincidentally, I had a discussion with one of my inside contacts that as part of the investigation. And he said to me, you know, a lot of the things that you would have put out there, of course, you know, I mean, imagine a man telling you, I think that there is need for an inquiry, a commission of inquiry into the police service. You know, people telling you, officers telling you this, because of certain aspects of the case, certain behavioral patterns that the family would have seen, and other officers who are quite frankly disgusted at the way this investigation has progressed. I mean, they can't speak on camera and they can't talk to you on the record about these things. But I mean, one person told me, you know, the police were clueless minutes after she was killed. You know, the officer there was at the investigation saying, close down the airports, you know. I'm serious. And
it went that far?
Yeah, it said, lock off the airport, sorry. And then, you know, you have a parameter where police officers should have locked down the general area going into West Trinidad, out of Port of Spain, Bassant, Eastern Main Road, and in the back of Nelly Savannah and so on. And if you look back, this is something I think, Kejan, that nobody knows. But maybe they didn't know, but I don't think either of us addressed it, was that on that specific weekend, there were a number of activities happening. There was a Point Forte border, so there was a huge contingent of police officers there concentrated. There was the funeral of former President Ian Robertson taking place in Tobago. There were a number of officers there. So clearly there was some strategic planning happening behind the scenes for quite a while, so that they knew when and where to strike.
And so let's look back on your story. You would have gotten access to the cell phone. And that's a major turning point in this, because up to now we haven't heard anything about the cell phone, who she might have called. How do you think this will affect the investigation, if at all?
Well, clearly, to me, I'm talking to the family members, it actually does more good for them than harm. Because they're telling you that the police took an entire month to come to them. Actually, they didn't come to them, they went to them and gave them the phone.
They gave it back to them. Yeah.
No, the police, they had to go to the police and give the phone and the laptop. Right. I mean, any investigator who is looking at this case will ultimately think that that is one of the key things that you need to know. Who she last spoke with, you know, and backtrack and by a process of elimination, say these are numbers that we want to question, these are conversations or so on that might be might be helpful in our investigation. And as the Commissioner indicated earlier on in this week, was that there were a number of numerous technical aspects and technological aspects, and which I addressed in the second part of the piece, as we saw on Tuesday night.
Looking back to May 4th, 2014, the morning that this happened, both of you would have been on the scene. What was that like with getting the first call and, I guess, springing into action? Because TV6 had live coverage from very early that morning. What was that like for you? Jovan, you could take this one.
I think we have to, I think Anselm was the person that was the first responder, as you say. It was kind of surreal to me, because I got the message and I was like...
I think the rest of the country had that sort of...
out of nowhere.
But it was just, it really struck home for me ironically, I was at Movie Town and I finished looking at Spider-Man at about 11:35. And this would have been,
you would have been very
25 to 30 minutes before she was actually killed. And for some strange reason, my phone was dying, and I didn't feel the need to plug it in to charge it. I just said, you know what? And I was with somebody, and I said to myself, you know what? We should go for a drink. And then we just changed our minds, and I just ended up going straight home. When I got home about 12:20, I saw my phone, it lit up. You know, my boss and everybody called. So I started, while Anselm was on the scene, I started making calls to other people. So I was able to gather some further information from my sources in respect to what might have transpired. And, you know, our boss, Dominic, spoke, he broke the story live, and we got all these details out. And I think, you know, when things like this happen, whether it be a death or a fire or some magnitude, we have to be that kind of respondent for the public, you know.
And so what can we expect now over the next 365 days or until somebody gets charged? Is it that how do we continue to tell this story? Because it's the same story. It's the commissioner says we're working assiduously. We say the family says it's not working, they're not working fast enough. How many more angles are there to this story? You keep naming a former government minister as part of the investigation. Is this something that's going to factor into the coverage later on?
Just to correct you, I said former government official.
Sorry.
And there are many former government officials. We don't want to be, you know, pointing out anybody unless, of course, the onus is on the police to build their case and get the evidence that will help solidify. A lot of hearsay has gone on. You know, people have said certain things about people and so on and so forth. We don't deal with that business of hearsay either. We try to get facts and be objective and chase the story in a very clear manner and fair manner, as well as fearless manner. And I think,
speaking of fearless, of course, I'm sure, do any of us have fears now after covering the story?
Well, you know, many people have asked me that, and as I said to me, I live with God looking over me every day, and you know, it's inevitable that we all must die one day. I mean, but at the end of the day, I try to do my job in a very responsible manner, and there are precautions that are taken from time to time.
I think it's basically what Mark said. You just take the necessary precautions. I mean, if you're fearful in this business, you're kind of
in the wrong business. Yeah. I'm going to leave it on that. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And remember, you can see all those stories if you missed them on our website, tv6tnt.com. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. So just as we close, I was digging through some archive material and I saw something that made me laugh. Remember last week when the PNM was battling the PP over whose idea it was to build the causeway to Chaguaramas? Well, I found this from the 2010 campaign, which shows that the more things change, the more they stay the same.
We say from this platform that Patrick Manning and his cronies are intellectually bankrupt. When we spend our night talking to you about those plans, next day, you know what happened? They're teething the plans and the policies, and they're coming the next day to say and to repeat what we've been sharing with you.
All right, that's our show. So that's in conclusion for this week. A brand new week of news begins right now.